I think it's something that I've always wanted to do. When I was in his old studio when I was a little kid, we had all kinds of Native American models show up to the house, and my dad would dress them up, and I would. There's even a picture. I gotta find it somewhere in here. There's me peeking around the corner, like 2 or 3 years old, and there's a guy sitting on. My dad had set up like a saddle system, and so there's an Indian guy sitting on his horse, kind of posing for my dad, and there's me watching, and these amazing looking people would show up to pose for my dad, and then I was also the kid that wanted to go muskrat trapping or raccoon trapping up the canyon with him before school, and I'd beg to go on the fishing trips. I begged to go on all the hunting trips that I could with him, when I'd sneak in and paint on his paintings, and I figured if I didn't get in trouble, I must have been doing a good job.
This is The Artful Painter, art lessons for artists, collectors, and people who love arts. In this edition of The Artful Painter, I sit down with Western artist Nicholas Coleman. We talk about what actually drives the creation of his magnificent Western-themed and wildlife paintings. It's not just about technique, though that's important, but he talks about how curiosity is such an underrated skill and how necessary it is to create these beautiful paintings. He talks about memory of experiences, history, how that affects us, and how we view the landscape and the wildlife therein. And he talks about the places that just won't let go of you. You are motivated to create based on the places that you've been and experienced. He talks openly about his creative process, why he paints from memory rather than projection, why some ideas interrupt deadlines. I'm sure we've all had moments like that. We drop what we're doing and we go on to the next thing. But that's okay, because good art, great art, needs to be captured in the moment. And he also talks about why history matters if you're going to paint the West with integrity. So if you care about painting, place, preserving something larger than yourself, this conversation is going to resonate with you. So let's get into this conversation with Nicholas Coleman. My name is Carl Olson, and this is The Artful Painter. So you just got back from Coors. What was that like?
Yes. It was. I haven't been in that show for 15 years. I was talking to Logan Ajej, and I think he got invited back last year, but he and I both got rotated out about 15 years ago, and we haven't been back. I haven't been back in 15 years, so quite a bit of change. It changed from the stockyards, which was great, but now they have this new Legacy Foundation location, and it's like the most amazing lodge, convention center, beautifully constructed venue that I think is gonna. It's already turning into it already was a fantastic show, and I think it's going to start being one of the best shows, I think, of Western art in the West and in America. Fantastic artists, everyone, hardworking. Boy, I was impressed.
I wished I could have gone. I had planned to go, but I had oral surgery, so much for that.
Yeah, teeth are always fun. So.
Yeah, so next year it's on my to-do list. I would like to go. I mean, it's almost in my backyard. I should be able to go. Yeah. So how does that work? It's a by invitation show, or do you apply? Or
I think you can apply, and once upon a time maybe I did. I can't remember how I got in it in the first place, but last year I was at the Briscoe show in Texas talking to Teal Blake. And he said, "Oh, let me introduce you to somebody." And it was Gracie Wells, and she's the new director for the Coors show, and then a little bit afterwards, she invited me, back into the show, and so that's kind of how it went for me, and maybe for some up and coming artists, there might be an application process, and being around, process, so you do get invited, kind of a thing. So,
well, that's nice. You had several pieces in that exhibit?
I did.
How long is the show open? I mean, if I went this weekend, would I be able to see the paintings?
Oh, I think it's up for at least a few weeks, like maybe 4 to 6 weeks, kind of a thing, and then they take it down. And so yeah, I think there's an opportunity to go see the show. So I think a few of the miniatures and a few paintings that maybe got sold. I'm the worst at reading the fine print. Like I know I'm behind on some deadlines with the Briscoe that's coming right up in March, and I still have to like finalize what paintings I'm sending, and I already know I'm behind, and I hate doing that. I just want to make sure that I get the best work to the show, and then at the same time you want them to. It's always this funny combination. I have no idea. I don't paint for. I have no idea what's trending. I have no idea what's. It's whatever I feel is my best work, and it might. I'm looking, going that one, maybe that one, and then I send it, and you just kind of hope for the best. And you think there should be better planning involved, and fine print and deadline passes. I just like. My hope is that the quality and the sales equate into. Oh, it was okay that he was a few weeks late, kind of a thing. So.
Well, it's interesting that you said you don't follow what is trending. But when you went to the show, I imagine you saw things that you said, oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yes, definitely.
What did you see?
But yeah, there's a few. Let's see. See, I don't even think other people are painting, trends. It's just they're painting who they are, which is, I think, if I was to give any advice to any up and coming artist or any artist who was asking for any kind of help, is just paint what you are passionate about, what gets you excited, and your enthusiasm shows through to the buying audience and the collectors. They can tell when you love your subject, and I could definitely see, there's a few standouts to me, and I wish I was paying attention to names. That's my other problem. Is a lot of times I'll know the artwork, and sometimes I'll know the name, and then when I meet the person, like so many people said hi to me, and I'm like, who was that? And they're maybe a little more conscientious than I am when it comes to. And the thing is, and I also realize I've been around. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, and so people actually do know who I am, which is always a shock to me. But I'm not playing favorites or anything. But Teal's work always stands out. He's always up to something, innovative and new to me, stuff that you don't typically. It's quality work, but it's he does a big bunking bronco painting on a piece of brown butcher paper. It's not to say finished. I mean, it's finished, but it's not a big solid frame. It has a mat on it. It's framed, and maybe there's paper still showing through, and it's you could call it a gamble, but it's impactful, and you walk by it and go, and it grabs your attention, and you go, wow, and that kind of stuff perks my ears up, and when I see it, I take notice, and for artists, I think that's what you want by anybody walking by your stuff, from across the room. They go, wow, what's that? And you get up closer, and it's wow, it's even better, So,
well, that's a good feeling when that happens. It is important, I think, to paint for yourself, but you're also painting hopefully something that resonates with people that want to see your work, want to buy your work.
Definitely.
Yeah. I'll tell you my first exposure. I was trying to think back. The first time I heard of you, and it was through your father. Your father was the first person I became aware of in the art world, in your family. And I was just learning how to paint. And there's a painting behind me.
Hey.
Okay. I've never sold it. I don't publish it other than you see a little, because I'm being honest. It was a inspired copy of one of your father's paintings, I think. So I did have a person one time, they said, I'll give you $1,000 for that. I said, nope, I can't sell it. It's very personal. It's mine. And besides, it's kind of a copy. So anyway, did you ever do that? Do copying to learn?
I have a neat Kaus copy that I did when Steve Rose of the Biltmore Gallery was still alive. He had this, like every once in a while he'd send my dad and I transparencies of Frank Tenney Johnson's Kaus paintings for sale. And I really love some of the early 20th, 19th, 20th century stuff. And he sent us this Kaus painting that I'm looking at right now. And I had it for 2 days, so I had to paint it fast. And I think the original, and I just saw it come up for sale. It might be coming up at Christie's. The original is like 33 by 43, and I made mine 30 by 40. And there's a couple of effigy jar things in the corners that I took out so it wouldn't be a direct copy, and I didn't have enough room. But I've had it for about almost 25 years now, sitting here in my studio, looking back at me, and I faked a couple dealers out when they come into my studio and see this thing. At the time, it was a 300. I remember there was a $375,000 painting at the time, and he overnighted it to us, and it was a little bit out of the frame. We put it back in the frame, and when we got back to him, I got in trouble a little bit because it was a little bit out of the frame again. Hey, I said, hey, blame FedEx. That's so.
Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that. You make me feel better.
Yes. Well, yeah. My dad, when I was a kid, always had me doing, copies of some masters, copies of. And I have a copy of one of my dad's of a Phillips Woverman painting of a horse peeing. He gave it to my daughter for one of her birthdays, and then it's supposed to be in her bathroom, but it's in my studio at the moment. So he goes, "Hey, that's not yours." I go, "I know." Let me grab it. It's holding up some books.
Yeah, go ahead, man. It's all right. It's
over. But this is kind of a neat copy that my dad did. Isn't that cool?
That is so cool.
I think it's so cool. So I'm actually doing him a copy to put back in his bathroom. But I just need to finish it now. So let's see. I lost the books.
I love your books. I think that's what started our interaction was books.
So.
What are you reading lately?
Looks like my bookshelf. I found a new book. It's in the other room. It's kind of got a long title. It was something about the Bozeman Indians up in Bozeman, Montana. Some of the early, mountain men, and then I was looking at a Wilhelm Kuhnert book last few days. I've been working on some African work lately, and he's always been an inspiration. And I think there might be some more African and wildlife paintings in the future.
Oh, neat. Have you been to Africa?
I have. And I need to go back is my problem. And some of his old photographs of him in camp with sketching his kills, and there's just, he was doing it. I think he started his first trip to Africa was 1896, and I think to myself, oh my goodness, the things he saw and the travel was just a little bit harder than it is nowadays, for sure. So you had to really, really want to go, and I think he went back about four or five times, and boy, oh boy, I'm sure that guy had a few adventures for sure. So.
Oh, that's amazing. It's interesting to see you branch out into the African wildlife subjects and landscapes, because I picture you and your father as being mostly the Western scene. Oh,
yeah, definitely. And my dad's been to Africa 9 times, and so he has a body of African work out there that not a lot of people know about, and. He's done some sculptures of Cape buffalo and black rhinos, and he's helped with the Lewa Foundation in Kenya, helping raise funds for black rhino conservation, and he has some interesting friends for sure. As much as Instagram lets you, or you're trying to, I don't even know what I'm trying to curate when I send stuff out. It's kind of oh look, I'm doing this today. So again. My organization's, people go, oh, it looks like it's all this amazing stuff. And my joke is it's all an illusion, so.
Well, isn't that the truth?
Oh, yeah.
I think I've just stopped curating, just throw things out. They say, well, you should do this and you should do that. And on YouTube, you should do this and do that. And I just said, you know what? I give up. I'm just putting what I want to out there. If people want to watch it, that's fine. They don't want to, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't think any algorithms like the way I do anything. I don't adhere to any kind of rules or modus or anything. And my knee-jerk reaction is to fight all that stuff anyway. So, and at the same time, crap, someone needs to know I'm still alive. That's my motivation for Instagram is I need a proof of life. So.
Yeah, there you go, proof of life. Now, what happens when I die? What's going to happen to all of those accounts?
Well, I know. I take my dad to shows, and people go, "Oh, you're still alive!" To my dad, who's 79 and still the hardest working guy I know. But they're like, "Oh, you're still." I don't think they ever thought he was dead, but he really hates going to shows, and and leaving a studio. But I drag him around every once in a while to make sure everyone knows he's still around. So whether he wants to or wants people to know he's alive or not. So,
You said something earlier, which I liked. You talked about being around interesting people. And do you feel like being around interesting people has really shaped or influenced the way you approach your art making?
probably, to be honest, probably yes. I've had the opportunity to meet some wonderful people that actually did change the trajectory of what I was doing with my life and my career at certain times of my life. I got kicked out of the Masters of the American West show in like early, I was like 2013 and 12, 11, somewhere in there. No, 13, for a misunderstanding. And I was like, great, now what am I going to do? And I've met wonderful people in this. I've met a few weirdos for sure. And that's my fault. But then the people have reached out to me, and it turned into invitations to. Of all funny things, it was a motorcycle show happening in the south of France in Biarritz, and a wonderful, who is now a good friend, named Vincent Pratt, he called me or emailed me or called me and said, "Hey, I really love your artwork. I put on a show in the south of France. Would you want to participate?" And it was the next year after, the year that I would have been absent from the Masters of American West. And even my wife, she goes, "Hey, you never know what the universe has in store for you. Maybe it's something even better. Like don't beat yourself up. Just because I typically am a very optimistic person. Things punch me in the face and I get back up and I look around and I expect there won't be any more fists waiting for me, And but he called me and invited me to this show, and at the time too, I have another funny friend who was my scoutmaster, who owned the Harley Davidson dealership in town, and it's a big one out in Linden. It could almost be a headquarters. It's so big.
This is in Utah, right?
This is in Utah, and I was doing some motorcycle paintings for him at the time. And I had a friend had to convince me to do this. He's like, "Well, why don't you?" I'm like, "Well, because I don't do that." He goes, "Why not?" I'm like, "I don't know." He's like, "Are there any rules that says you can't do that?" I go, "No." And he goes, "Well, you think of Harley Davidson, you think of the West, you think of open deserts, you think of the outdoors." And he goes, "That's you." I go, "True." He goes, "Well, why not do a big landscape with we want a couple of your motorcycles ripping through the landscape?" And I go, "Well, that's an idea." And so sometimes it takes outside influences to get me moving someplace. And then I told this new friend, I said, "Hey, I've been working on some motorcycle." He goes, "You do motorcycle painting?" Let's do that too. Can you send those? I said, "Sure." And so that turned into a wonderful friendship. And then I've met some editors of some magazines in the UK, and I met some friends in Belgium and in Spain, and it turned into kind of brand work, but more doing interesting paintings for people that I wouldn't have met in the West, or interior designers, or people that typically are sometimes buying paintings for decoration, and then it turned into a show in Japan, and even my own galleries, Bighorn Gallery of all funny galleries, to turn it into a commission for George Lucas.
You did a commission for George Lucas?
I did. He did he opened up. He did a book. It was called Star Wars Visions, and what he wanted to do, I don't know if it was. Granted, he's behind Star Wars, and his company ended up buying my painting and a number of other Western artists' paintings. I think Jamie Wyeth was in the group, and although he sent a very strange Vietnam-looking painting into this, I don't think he got the assignment, or whoever his handler is sent a very strange painting, for Star Wars Visions. So it was other artists' take on Star Wars. And I know Jeremy Lipking did a painting, and I think Andy Thomas did, and a few other artists, Western artists, did some paintings. And then they were going to do a big show, something. I'm not sure what happened, but then the show would end up a few years later. So when I had my actual show in Japan, it was happening simultaneously. So I got to go see my paintings at this Star Wars Vision show up in a giant skyscraper and, standing room only to get in kind of a thing, because there was a big long line like up the spiral stairs up to this giant building. And I kind of bypassed that line and said, hey, I have tickets waiting for me to go into the show, and I got in trouble for taking photographs, and I had to I said, hey, no, look, this is me. And so definitely you meet interesting people, and then certain things, funny things happen, and you get invitations to places you wouldn't have gone, maybe hunting or a fishing trip here and there. And I had a friend, it wasn't a friend yet, turned into a friend. He goes, hey, my wife didn't shoot this big elk, but we got a photograph on our cell phone, this terrible photograph. Could you paint her a painting for Christmas for me? And, oh, by the way, can I convince you to do, half trade and half cash? I'll take you fishing up in Wyoming. And I said, sure, that sounds great. And then he was Johnny Morris's of Bass Pro Shops property manager. He was in charge of helping form the rivers on his properties for fishing. And I said, I said, I've met John. He's come to a couple of shows of mine up in Wyoming. And he said, hey, let's get him on the phone. And anyway, that turned into some T-shirt designs for Johnny and a few other fun things that we did together. And so definitely, back to your question, you meet people and, interesting things happen.
That's pretty cool. So I want to go back to George Lucas. I want to know how that works, because I've never had anything like that happen. I mean, what do they do? Somebody from there just picks up the phone and calls you and says, hey, we want you to do a painting? Or
it was a bit like that, and then an email, and then a 50-page contract showed up. I'm not joking.
50-page contract?
It was like, you can't do this, you can't do that. We like this, we like this. You can't share this, you can't. Because I asked for all kinds of reference material. And, my little kid version of me was like, oh boy, Star Wars, because I loved it. And now I kind of feel like it's slightly, there was magic in that there was only 3 movies when I was a kid. And now there's 53 movies, and I don't know what's going on anymore. And I don't care as much. Because there's so much, I've lost interest. That's the problem. But it was one of my funny, childhood little things. I'm like, hey, this is great and fun. And then my contact, Jonathan Rinsler, sadly, he passed away of cancer a few years ago, but he was like the most helpful guy, invited us, my wife and my family, although they were little kids at the time, to San Francisco to go on a tour of, Industrial Lights and Magic. And I got to see all kinds of pretty amazing, the sculptures and the models and some of the the filmmaking things that they invented to composite certain shots. And my little boy, he's 18, is a budding little filmmaker and sculptor himself, and loves practical effects. And he just told me today he did a bust of Lincoln for the high school art show, his senior high school, and it just got in. He also did a claymation of Werner Herzog. That's one of his favorite directors, and so his brain is constantly spinning and whirling around, and so it's fun to show him all these things and to expose him to all these things. And I even looked just a few weeks ago if Industrial Lights and Magic does tours. They do not. So I just realized how lucky my wife and I were to get a tour about 15 years ago or so now. And we saw how they make toys, their video game things, some of the old matte paintings that, some of the old famous matte background designers were doing. And my son kind of wants to bring all that back. And he's been watching a bunch of spaghetti westerns lately. We watched a funny one with Carl Kinski the other night where it's Italy. It's supposed to be in Utah, which was pretty funny. But there's this mute guy who's the good guy who gets shot down at the very last 4 minutes of the movie. But his big thing was he was shooting people's thumbs off. And my son's like, "Oh boy, this is great! I got to cast a hand and I got to figure out how to shoot people's fingers off. This is going to be great. And he also loves like the opening credits, with the, kind of, it's almost cartoon, and then gunshots and then the freeze frame of the guy's face. And so he's actually trying to figure out how to do that right now. And he was explaining it to me, and I'm looking at him, I'm like, I said, you're on your own, buddy. I don't know about this. But it doesn't stop him. Like he's a kind of a constant force, which I love to see. So he's one of the busiest guys I know.
I think it's beautiful that you're nurturing his interest in that.
Oh yeah, it's fun. I couldn't stop him. That's the other thing too. I couldn't stop him. He's going to do it anyway, even if I said go for it.
Oh, that's interesting about the spaghetti westerns. Watching those, I still watch them. I love them.
The music's great. Some of the scenery is amazing. It was really funny. We noticed that, and the cinematographer loved it. They had these guys on horseback on no trails. I mean, they're in 5 feet deep snow, like barely getting through the snow, and it looks so cool. These awesome mountains in the background, but definitely aren't Utah. Wonderful pine trees. It's like everywhere everyone was going, they were up to their chest in snow. And it's like, there probably would be a place where there's a trail. That's what I'm thinking. Let's do this.
There was one I saw. I wished I could remember the name of it, but it opens up with the Durango-Silverton train that's down the road from here, right? So the whole opening sequence, the titles and all this is really cool, and it's that train. But then it goes to Spain.
Yes.
The Western's actually shot in Spain.
And that is one of the longest opening scenes ever, and I kind of love it that it is.
Yeah. Well, I knew one of the film editors for the Hunger Game movies. His name is Alan Bell. And he and I had a conversation about editing. And one of the things he mentioned was he likes to linger on a shot. And he said most of the movies, they're very frenetic. The cut can't be more than 2 seconds. And he says, I can't stand that. He said he wanted to linger. And that's probably why he only did 2 Hunger Game movies, because they want that frenetic stuff where something is just constantly going. But he would linger. And that movie was filmed back where I used to live in Georgia. There was a park that I just explored every square inch when I was a child. And it was pretty cool to see the scenes of the movie filmed right there in the spots that I, as a child, the rocks that I would sit on,
That's cool. My son loves, like I was trying to tell him, I'll send you this over, because he did a movie called The Lost Cowboy, and it's one of his first Western things that he really, really wanted to do. And he's crossing this old neat bridge, but his guys cross from here across the whole screen. I said, you could cut that up a little bit. And I said, people don't need. He goes, no. I hate weird jump cuts. No. And I said, all right, it's your movie, So it's fun. I don't want to ruin his vision, because it's untouched at the moment. Somebody down the road is going to try to change it, and I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. So,
well, he may be creating a new language for film, or going back to the roots of what filmmaking was. Another friend of mine, Gail Tattersall, he filmed the entire series of House MD several years ago. And we were just talking about the trends in cinematography, and one was to make the ugly beautiful. He says the problem with making the ugly beautiful is people don't realize it's actually ugly. And so he would try to endeavor to show it. If it's ugly, it's ugly. Does that make any sense?
It does. It does. I fought against an art professor when I was in college, who a couple times, he tried to kick me out of his class a few times because I didn't agree with him. His take on art was so strange to me, and it turns out that he was at school at the same time my dad was at school here in Provo, Utah, at Brigham Young. But when my dad went in the 60s, they were pushing kind of postmodernism, and my dad was a guy pushing for landscapes and roosters and chickens and cows and pastoral kind of things, and kind of Barbizon, Hudson River School paintings was what my dad's first love was. This guy, oh my gosh, there was at the time I was 21, there was a 35-year-old woman who was a high school art teacher who was in this advanced watercolor techniques. By the way, I never saw one advanced watercolor technique demonstrated in this class. It was one of my very last classes, which is why I didn't let him kick me out. I had to actually pull some rank with some of the dean and to keep me in the class, and a couple other teachers to like, hey, keep him in. And I wasn't trying to be antagonistic or anything. I just went, when I saw something stupid, I went, hey, and he was asking the class, and he only let 6 people, there were 6 students in this class, and this one woman, she goes, oh, I love to paint landscapes. And he goes, well, by the time we're done, I'll have you painting parking lots. She's like, excuse me? Like painting parking lots or painting paintings of parking lots? He's like, either or. She's like, and you could tell she was trying to understand what in the world this guy could be saying. She goes, oh, do you want me to learn and to grow and to try something different? He goes, no, I want people, like you said, painting ugly things. No, there are so many landscape painters out there. We need people painting things like parking lots. And I said, no. Sorry, no.
You did this during the class.
I said, you cannot tell her what to paint. I said, even if you think there are too many landscape painters out there, I said, the landscape certain landscapes haven't been painted by her. Yes, landscape painters have been painted by people, but not by her. And and then we had a few other conversations in that class, and he's like, well, maybe you should leave. And I said, I wish I could, but I can't because I need one more credit and you're the guy. And then, he was a fun guy. And then what's funny is it was kind of a point of pride to me after the fact that some of these encounters I would have with professors or people, they're like, oh, the West has been painted. It's been done. It's been all these things. And my whole thing was, well, it hasn't been done by me. My experience and how I view it and how I see it, and it kind of laser focused me on what I wanted to do. And then I always joke, for better or for worse. And now you get older and you go, for better or worse, had I been a little more amenable, a little more malleable, maybe I would have. But my whole instinct is like, professors are there to help facilitate the vision of their students who are paying for this education. If they want to do one weird thing, okay, what tools can I give the student to get him to where he actually wants to go, as opposed to brainwash him and make him go down this other thing that's not. One time he goes, it looks like, I brought some stuff framed that I was sending to my gallery, up in Jackson Hole, and he goes, this looks like you're trying to sell it. I said, bingo, you're right, I am. He goes, well, what are you doing that for? I said, well, I have a gallery up in Jackson Hole who sells my work. And I said, but my mom asked me to graduate from college and then I could do whatever I wanted. But in the meantime, I'm here with you. And he didn't like that. And then when I had a show, I had a one-man show in New York at the end of I was just finishing college, but my first one-man show was in New York at the Bartfield Gallery. And they had made a brochure and they sent me like 10 of them. And I made sure to leave him at one at his office before I left.
Do you know whatever happened to him?
He's still alive. She was shocking to me. I think might be in his 90s, and I've been told by Vern Swanson, who was the director of the Springville Art Museum here, who's a treasure trove of knowledge, like an expert on Alma Tadema, and he goes, oh, I feel bad for him. I think he's had a few strokes, mini strokes, and so he's not quite. And this was back when I was in school, but he was. Like, it was his postmodern stuff, and he loved mixing his own paint, and it was always kind of a dull. His paints were never very vibrant, in my opinion. And my kids, we were at the Spring Art Museum a few weeks ago dropping off my daughter's little drawing for her high school art show, and there was a painting there, and before I knew it was his, my daughter goes, that's the saddest thing I've ever seen. And then I looked, I'm like, my old professor, perfect. And it was in the permanent collection, partially because it's in Utah. I don't know. I got to stop talking about that. Anyway, let's focus on positive things. I
got you wound up on something negative.
I can go down a tangent, and that's easy for me. So,
if you had the choice, I know it was very kind of you and very respectful to respect your mother's wishes. But if you had 100% the choice, would you go back to school?
This is my early years as an artist were kind of funny. Because even in the end of high school, I was a good student. I was in all the honors and AP classes, and mainly because my mom wanted me in them. And she was kind of my taskmaster, like making sure. And I know why, because, she's even told me when she was in college, she had an experience with her. She was like, hey, let's go out to go to the party. And her friends were like, well, we all are in the same class. We got to study for the test. And Mom was like, study? What are you talking about? And she goes, Nick, I was a terrible student. She goes, it was a miracle I got into BYU, but that was just the thing you did in the '60s. She was from California, the Mormon kids went up to BYU. And she goes, and then I realized, well, people like pay attention to their education. So I think she feels, and she's a smart lady. I think she wanted to make sure all of her children had an education. And even at the time when I was a kid, I'm like, I understood, an education. But like there was a life drawing class at the Springport Museum that I thought would be fun to take, and she's like, "No, you're not going to go look at naked people," And I was like, "All right, sure, fine." Till Saturday morning, I was heading over there. She's like, "What do you think you're doing?" "No, you don't need to do that." And I took the figure drawing classes at BYU, and they were in like modest kind of swimsuits for the drawing classes, and it was certainly fine. But I think one thing that made my mom mad is I can't remember what happened. There was a test coming up or something, and her thing was, well, you should be able to be, you're so prepared you could go bowling the night before your test. And I was going bowling with some friends. And she goes, what do you think you're doing? I said, don't you have that test tomorrow? I said, I do. She goes, well, you should be home studying. I said, I'm so prepared, Mom. I can go bowling. And she's like, oh, no. I don't think I told her how poorly I did on that test.
Well, the secret's out now.
And then somewhere in the months, my senior year, she's like, we got in an argument about you're going to end up going to the state college. And I said, and I thought agreeing with her was the right course, And I said, okay, I'll go there. That's the wrong answer, mister. And 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 so I applied to BYU, and it was the only college. My thing is like, if I get in, I had like, I wanted to get my life is I want to get busy doing the thing I want to do. And I'm like my son, like my wheels are always spinning about the next painting, the next place I can go to get the ideas for the paintings I want to do. Like in the evenings, I couldn't even go to sleep. My brain was so, spinning around so much. I had to learn how to like calm my breathing down, calm my thoughts down, almost meditate so I could actually get to sleep, so I could sleep. And my son lately is like, I can't even get to sleep. My brain won't turn off. And so I've been trying to teach him some tricks, and he's already ahead of me in skill and see, I'm still trying to think what in the earth I would have done, if my mom wasn't cracking the whip. I maybe would have gone just because I didn't know where else to find girls,
Well, that's an honest answer. Yeah.
So I'm a little bit of a hermit. You can tell by my beard. I just chopped 2 inches off yesterday because I kind of look like a crazy. Again, I look like a crazy person with my hair out and my beard down. Oh goodness.
Your father was an artist, and now you're an artist. Was there a point where you resisted the idea of being an artist, or was it something that you always wanted to do?
I think it's something that I've always wanted to do. When I was in his old studio when I was a little kid, we had all kinds of Native American models show up to the house, and my dad would dress them up, and there's even a picture. I got to find it somewhere in here. There's me peeking around the corner, like 2 or 3 years old, and there's a guy sitting on. My dad had set up like a saddle system, and so there's an Indian guy sitting on his horse, kind of posing for my dad, and there's me watching, and these amazing looking people would show up to pose for my dad, and then I was also the kid that wanted to go muskrat trapping or raccoon trapping up the canyon with him before school, and I'd beg to go on the fishing trips. I begged to go on all the hunting trips that I could with him, when I'd sneak in and paint on his paintings, and I figured if I didn't get in trouble, I must have been doing a good job. And I think he just kind of laughed and fixed whatever in the heck I did. And he would actually mark off spots for me on the, canvas or masonite board he was painting on at the time, that I could, a lot of times those dark spaces under rocks that he was doing. And I'm like, oh boy, I got to paint, here. And then I, begged to go with him to the art store and get, Prismacolor colored pencils and all the kind of fancy pencils and charcoal. And, I wanted to do it, on clay, and I wanted to do it all. And then I think my parents, when I was 21, sat me down, I don't know if I was graduating, or this is the conversation like, hey, if you go to college, I'll let you do, and finish, I'll let you do what, anything you want to do. And even my mom yesterday, we were talking with my sister, and she's like, this is why I told you it wasn't easy. I said, I never thought it wasn't. And also, when I was a teenager, I used to make mats for my dad's watercolors that we'd send off to New York and different places. And I was the kid that, got sent out to the neighboring city to get his paintings, photographed and make, transparencies done of his work. And I was the shipper. I was the runner, and I got this mini apprenticeship that I don't think he realized he was giving me, but it taught me the ins and outs of the art business. And I met all the dealers, and I met, then he took me to some of the shows, and so I kind of knew what I was in for without knowing that's what I was signing up for. Yeah, my mom's like, are you sure you really want to do this? Like, and my dad's like, you're not doing this because you think I want you to do this, right? And I said, no, like, this is what I want to do. Like, and my dad asked me a good question. He goes, what are you thinking about when there's nothing else to think about? And I go, painting, like the next painting. And he goes, okay, these are good answers. It have him stop worrying about me so much. And for the longest time, they pushed us being lawyers and doctors. And they, my little brother works for Google, and he is very smart. But they, the joke for him in high school, he wanted to go to MIT at the time, and what was it? MIT PhD equals MONEY. That was my dad's funny little thing for him. But MIT, all of my dad's kids were all, our knee-jerk reaction when it comes to authority is to do the opposite of what anybody's telling us. And so there is a little bit of a rebellious in that to all of us. And so I just had a hard time, my mom's like, just, if you can, try not, in high school especially, try not to argue, just do the work, argue after school, argue with me, your frustrations, vent to me and my dad especially. And even watching my kids, I'm doing slightly different. I'm not cracking, we emphasize in education how important it is, because it really, especially this day and age, it's very important. And it's not to say that everything you're learning is going to make you the smartest guy, but there are tools, they're jumping through the world's hoops, tools that you can learn and working with other people, because there's no escaping people. You're always going to run into them, and always you're going to run into something silly that's just crazy, and you need to know how to deal with it. And I think that's where a lot of going to college is you're learning the systems of the world and hoops that you need to jump through, and how to work with other people nicely. And one of the best lessons my mom probably ever taught me was, when you meet people, make sure they were glad they met you, And because every once in a while you have a weird encounter and you go, wow, and you have a funny story about somebody, and my thinking is, what's the story they're telling about me when they go home? Like, did I come off as a complete nut job? And I've joked with my friends about this. He goes, well, were you ever trying to get anything out of anybody? Were you trying to take advantage? Were you trying to be dishonest? I go, no. So that's the last thing I want to be. He goes, they're not telling that story then. And he goes, and they're not telling anybody else because they didn't pull one over on you. They're not going to let that out. So I'm like, all right.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of, education was, I value it highly, but one of the things, and I've mentioned this before, and I've gotten hate mail as a result of it, but one of my interview questions for people that would be working for me, my last question typically was, what have you read lately? 95% of them could not even answer that question. And unfortunately, in software, you must read. You've got to read the code. Of course, that's even changing now with AI and all that kind of stuff. But then that's what I needed. I needed somebody to read. I needed someone that was curious, because software is about problem solving, real world.
I think curiosity is an underrated skill, actually. These, especially this day and age. And this friend I was just mentioning, like he has a YouTube channel. I'll send you his link too. His handle is Mediocre Amateur. He's very self-deprecating, and he shouldn't be, because what he does is not amateurish at all. And I've traveled with him all over the world. He wants to visit space. That's one of his funny goals. And I have zero desire to visit space. I'm like, like vacuum, And he goes, no, it'd be so cool. And he tells me the virtues of and how amazing it would be. And he's visited some of the harshest places on the earth. I mean, he did Kilimanjaro by himself. He's done. I was in the Dolomites with him a year or so ago, and we're up in Canada a few years ago, just after COVID, and doing some hiking in some mountains. And he likes to punish himself physically. I think that's. I don't know if he is aware of this, but his wife actually is a seamstress, and she was making some costumes for my son's project he's doing for one of his film things, and they came over and visited with us the other day, and we were joking about his endless need to travel, and he doesn't. It's not even lavish. None of the stuff he does is lavish at all. It's shoestring budget. Has to do it. He's compelled, and it's fun to see him do this. I just worry about his safety some of these times. But his wife's like, she goes, what am I going to do? I can't stop him. He has to do these things. And it goes back to this being endlessly curious about the natural world and getting places. And we were up in Canada, and he goes, and we're there for like a day, and we're up in Banff, and he kind of looks around. He goes, oh, I'm surprised that no one's recognized me. I said, oh, Mr. Fancy hasn't been recognized. Within not even 30 seconds later, someone goes, hey, mediocre amateur. He goes, hey, look. And then I go, well, what do you know? And he goes, oh, that guy doesn't count. He's from Utah. But he's met people in other countries who are like, hey, we're here because of you. You showed us, step by step. You showed us maps. You showed us things we needed. And that's his thing, too, is education of how to do these things. If you don't know how to do this, this is how you do it. And he's turned his platform into this wonderful sharing opportunity. It's not just me. It's, yes, I'm here doing this, but you can too.
That is neat. Speaking of curiosity, I am very curious about your studio there. When I look at something, I said, man, I'd be that guy. Oh, what's that on your bookshelf? And you seem to be a collector of things, a collector of memories. Are these props that you...
So props, yeah, things that have been following me home since I was a kid are in my studio right now. I have a little chipmunk, freeze-dried chipmunk that was one of my very first kills, we'll call it. We used to have a cabin up at Sundance Mountain Resort. We could see across to Robert Redford's cabin across the way there, and used to run into him when I was skiing as a kid. But yeah, a lot of funny things have followed me home over the years, hunting trips and fishing, and I've rescued a few, heads and horns out of antique shops in the West and funny little towns, and then my dad a few years ago got mad at me because I bought a book. He goes, I got that book. He goes, you know how long that took me to find that book? And and you can just you type things in and you can track it down and have it shipped to your door, and 3 days later kind of a thing. And my wife gets upset with me sometimes because I am a bit of a pack rat, but it's an organized, mess. I try to organize it, and there's definitely a story behind all kinds of funny things in here.
I am curious. Now you got the things that followed you home. Do you go out into the wild, go outside and do outdoor painting as well?
I have. My problem, like I've taken my stuff to Italy, and I've taken my stuff to Alaska and up to Canada, and my problem too is I do like to see it. I love to see it and just be there and not worry about the work aspect of it all the time. And I used to draw on airplanes. Airplanes, I try to ignore the fact that I'm on an airplane if I can. And I know I have there are mosquitoes in a few of my paintings that and squirrel tracks that have found their way into some of my paintings that I've done outside. But I typically am a studio painter. But I get out with my camera and my if there's something that I really need to get down, I will sketch it out, bring it back to the studio with my photographs. And a lot of my paintings, my brain is my Photoshop. I don't project or I don't trace anything on. It's a lot of my photographs are inspiration. It's an angle, it's a color, it's a shape. Sometimes it's, if it's a mountain range that needs to be recognizable, yes, there definitely is reference aspects to, my photographs. And then what's fun too is I have my old actual photographs, physical photographs of that I've taken that I used to do, and then also a lot of my dad's stuff that there's like a few key ones that my dad and I have tried to save over the years, is just a good example of certain shapes and colors that we gravitate towards back to, and try to remind ourselves of a certain time or a feeling of a day that we loved. So
Yeah, I think that's interesting what you said about, the work, the actual work of doing the painting can detract from the observation, the feels, collecting the memories, collecting the smells, the sights, and the experience. And I have found that with myself, there are times I like to do it because it is fun. And I live, close enough to areas that I can go and be private. I don't like the spectacle of it.
yeah.
I just, I don't go to these conventions and things I just don't like that.
I've been invited, and that's my problem. Is I am very introverted. Crowds drive me nuts. Loud, anything. I can't last very long. I've been invited after things, and I don't go. Yeah, I've been invited places, and I can't pull myself to to get there and hang out with other painters and artists. That whole idea just like I can't. I'm very strange, and I've joked with my other buddy. He's like, "Yeah, you're broken. Like there's something wrong with you." And I have a couple good friends and my wife and my kids. I'm good, And I have good acquaintances, and I have more friends than that. But I try to keep it small.
My daughter calls. She uses this phrase: when her social quotient is filled up, it's time to go. Right? It's just time to go. And
my wife's family will come visit, and after number of minutes, I'll hear this, "Where'd Nick go?" I'm like, "Oh no, they noticed." I thought I was being sneaky.
Let's talk about your painting process just for a little bit. I'm not looking just for the technique. What I'm looking for is the thinking process of how you go about deciding what to paint and how you develop that. You already mentioned your brain is your Photoshop, and I love that. I've never heard anybody use that expression, but that is so cool. I'd like to know more about your process of developing an idea for a painting.
So, again, I wish I was more organized, but I guess what's made my work is the way I get to go about my work. Is it goes back to curiosity and enthusiasm, and my dad and I. We keep an eye on certain auctions. Some deceased masters, Carl Rungus, Bruno Lillefors, Albert Bierstadt, Thomas Morantz, are some of our, Frederick Church are some of our most favorite guys. But some of these prices that are realized on these paintings at auction are just astronomical. And my dad's thing is like, well, we paint, we can do that. Granted, we're selling our stuff. And he goes, we can always paint another painting. Like if we love that stag painting so much and we love that line, he goes, what's to stop us from trying, doing that ourselves? And so, when I was looking at the Kuhnert book the other day, I go, wow. And I was meeting with some people in Denver that we still work with, that are the founders of the Lewa Foundation in Kenya that are trying to bring the numbers back for the gravy zebra and the black rhino. And so then my dad's old hunting, he's a professional hunter. He goes, I have this wonderful book that I thought of your dad when I found it. And I can't remember he got it from a tracker in Africa, but basically it's from the 1920s. It's like a recipe book, but it's crisp, crunchy and old. And it has all these newspaper articles from the early 1900s and what was really cool is one of the articles was, Englishman kills 136 elephants. And you go, that's the headline. You go, holy cow. And I start reading it, and he goes, sometimes he kills 6 before tea time, and he'll go do the same thing the next day. And it goes talking about this article, and then it gets down to this, and his name is Commander David Blunt. Well, I've hunted with Captain David Blunt's son years ago, and his name was Nicky Blunt. But there's some kind of funny hierarchical, historical, wonderful things that happen in Africa, and when it comes to conservation and when it comes to hunting and some of these historical things. Half the reason I paint the West is I love history. I love the wonderful parts of history, and I kind of love the terrible parts because that's what makes good stuff so good, and it makes the bad stuff bad. And of course, we don't want to repeat the bad stuff. And here we are in the future, in the present, trying to move forward, and we want things to go right going into the future. So I mean, that's why you need to remember the bad, awful parts, so you don't repeat those parts. And sadly, we see a lot of those same things repeating themselves right now, because some people don't want to bother themselves with history or how certain things happened, or they don't believe certain things happened, which blows my mind.
Factual history is inconvenient to a lot of people.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, and when I was a kid, my dad, again, Life and Death in the Yellowstone, grizzly bear attacks, books. And I was just amazed and entranced by the lore of the West, history of the West. And in Provo, Utah, and in some other interviews I've mentioned, and I'll mention it again, Provo, Utah was named for the French fur trapper Etienne Prevost, who came through Utah County in the 1820s. And I live in the foothills of the Wasatch Front under Squaw Peak, just 20 minutes from Sundance and Provo Canyon, where Etienne Prevost was taken captive. And 4 of his 6-man party were killed. He escaped with another guy, never to return. But all the cities up the Wasatch Front are Murray, Ogden, Draper, are all named for mountain men who were here way back when. And, growing up here, and I had friends in high school, oh, Provo's lame, it's silly, it's this, it's that. I never thought that. I'm like, wow, there's so much history here. There's so many cool things that happened. And I'm still on the tip of the iceberg, especially when it comes to my painting and the things I want to accomplish and new things that I run into historically. And then the history of Africa is magic. And I can see why so many, Teddy Roosevelt, Carl Akeley, two pioneers in conservation effort. The whole reason that we have the mountain gorilla today is Carl Akeley shot one and he goes, oh my gosh, if the white man discovers these creatures, they're going to be gone. So immediately in the early 1900s, they protected them, and they're still around today because of he and Teddy Roosevelt. And then if you're ever at the Natural History Museum in New York, you're standing in line waiting to get in, and you read the history of why he started that. And we have Yellowstone because of Thomas Moran and Teddy Roosevelt, setting aside these places that are just still magic to this day. Might not have the same magic, but they're still, in Yosemite. There's this history of the West, that there are bits and pieces that are still preserved. And I think in Western art, there are a number of artists, talented artists that are doing their best to preserve that feeling, that spirit. And I think my dad's tapped into that. And without him knowing that's what he was doing with me, and that's definitely my goal, is to help, preserve this heritage that there really is, of the American West and the magic of the West and in wild places especially. And so a lot of these things go into, things that I get excited about, read about, especially when we read about things. And when I was going through that book of this guy's hunting stories, and he's part of a professional hunters group, he's 80 years old. And he goes, oh, I found this book and I wanted to share it with these other professional hunters on Facebook. And I still need to track this book group down if I can, if it's not private. But all the postcards and photographs, and it was like this treasure trove of hidden secret knowledge that no one knows about. And it's just in this funny little book. And he's like, oh, I think I'm gonna give it to your dad. I'm like, please do. I'll take it to him. He goes, well, I need to pull a couple things out of it first, and to copy and I'll be talking. I actually have a meeting with his son later today, and I'm going to mention this book, and we'll figure out a way to preserve this book and share it, because it's too neat to just, holy smokes, it's so cool. So this has been my process. I get excited, and then even on my easel right now are 3 Gravy's zebra that I had to get out of my brain once I started doing some research on them. And so I have deadlines, and then don't tell anybody, but I'll stop my deadlines just to get something out of my brain because I have to. I have no idea if it's going to sell. I have no idea if it's going to find a home. I have to paint it. So,
Nicholas, I really appreciate you joining me in this conversation on The Artful Painter. It's been a real pleasure talking with you and having an insight into your studio and your thinking processes and your beautiful art. It's been a real pleasure talking with you today.
Well, thank you so much. This has been fun, and I appreciate talking with you. So.
getting a picture on the TV.